Welcome to a new episode on the Technomora channel. We really hope you will enjoy watching it and invite you to tell us what you think of it by leaving your reactions below the video. And now, please allow me to present your host, Technomora.
Thank you, Julie, for that nice introduction. And now I hope you, my kind viewer, will enjoy watching this video where I restore an iconic tuner amplifier made by Braun in the late 60s. There you have it. And by the same token, a quick preview of what sorts of projects you could expect in the coming weeks and months. So, without further ado, here it comes. There's only one thing I didn't do, and that's to repaint the cabinet. For the simple reason it's winter right now, and I really don't want to spray paint indoors. It's just too unhealthy and smelly. Alright, so you can tell the tuner has quite a bit of damage. You can see here the front of the tuner is seriously bent, so there's something wrong here. And I wouldn't doubt that somebody tried to open it up to, well, hopefully not, of course, to mess around inside of it. But in any case, to have a look inside of it. Okay. Alright, so here we go. Let's have a look. I undid the cover. It should come loose, but okay, there it goes. Alright, there you go. So here is the cover. Undid it. So let's explore the interior of this mighty tuner power amplifier together. Alright, so what do we see in here? Well, first of all, what we see is this mighty transformer here, and it's quite a thick block. In fact, it's a little bit reminiscent of the type of transformer I found in certain old vacuum tube radios. So it's actually a monster of a transformer. I would guess at least for 5 or 6 amps, if not more. And then the next thing that you see inside of here is are these large electrolytics right here. So this one here, and these two there, and this one. So my guess is this this whole entire board here is probably the amplification side of the tuner amplifier, and in fact I'm pretty certain that's what it is, because the power transistors for the output are right down here. Okay, so yeah, okay, and they are mounted on a mighty aluminum heatsink at the back of the radio. Strangely enough though, the heatsink is inside the body of the tuner, not on the outside, which in my opinion is not such a good idea. I mean, you do need serious airflow to cool the heatsink off, and building it inside an enclosure is never really a good idea. Alright, so yes, this board here, yeah, does seem to be, or might be, the source of the problem, according to the seller. Like I said, one of the output channels of the amplifier doesn't seem to work. Now, I do see a date code right down there. Okay, and I'm not sure, because I'm reading this upside down, but I would say June 78, maybe? I don't know. Yeah, June 78 or June 76 maybe? No idea. I'll have to look that up. So, at first glance, I don't see anything burned on the amplifier board. Yeah, there's quite a bit of dust on it, but I do not see anything as such broken or burnt or whatever. Okay, then we move on. As we move on to the front of the radio, there is, of course, the tuner part of the tuner amplifier, and that's this board right here. Okay, so very clean design with little breakout boards in it, so little separate little modules. I don't know yet what these modules are, but it's quite interesting to see that they use this as a method of building up the tuner. Alright, yeah, you could say they are an intricate kind of couplet, you could say, or maybe even a precursor of what we would call now integrated circuits. Okay, and by the way, these little boards are soldered to the lower PCB. Okay, so it's not like it's a plug-in or anything, but they are actually soldered to the lower PCB. Yeah, that might be a bit of a pain. Yeah, as usual, you know, with this sort of thing, there's no obvious error. So what I propose that we should do is put the radio on, or the tuner, let's say, on the variac, and then slowly power it up, and then see if we can find any obvious defects that way, or at least hear any defects. Alright, so I hooked up my tuner, the Braun. I hooked up the Braun Regie 450S to my Variac over there. Okay, and the voltage that the Variac outputs, you can see at the top, and the lower readout, the green readout, shows you the current the tuner would draw. So let's see if we can switch it all on and then have a go at it. I'll put the volume lower. Hang on. Lautstärke. So I'll put that low. Pegel. That's peak. I'll put that in the center. Tiefen. That's low. That's high. Pegel is actually peak. Don't ask me what they exactly mean by pegel, but I'll look that up. Okay, so now, in case you're wondering what I was talking about, here it is. Really a short supply of space here, but this is what I mean. Okay, so there you have the Tiefen button, the Höhen button, so the high tones, and this is the tuning knob. Okay, so down there actually is the on-off button. So it's that green button you see there. Okay, so let's switch it all on. Alright, now I'm curious to hear how it will work, but okay, here it goes. Alright, it's on. Okay. And the tuner is in fact connected to the speakers up there. They are a pair of 20 watt Loewe, also German speakers, also 70s by the way. Yeah, I don't hear a thing quite yet, so let's turn up the voltage a little bit. But I do not see any smoke or any obvious thing that would be broken or something. Also, I do not hear any buzzing or crackling from the speakers. Remember though, there is no antenna connected to the tuner, so, and actually I don't know on which band I am. Okay, I'll have a look at that in a minute, but I do not hear any crackling, and I do not smell anything, or yeah, I still hear nothing from the speakers. I don't see anything. The transformer is cool. The heatsink of the power transistors is cool. So, yeah. Okay, let's bump up the voltage a little bit more. There you go. 220 volts. Yeah, the dial lights or the panel lights are all lit. Yes. Okay. Interesting. I do not see anything sparking nor smoking, nor do I smell anything burnt. Alright, I tried every possible band selector, and in fact we are on AM band, so in German that would be MW, which stands for Mittelwelle. Okay, so, and the volume is pretty low, and I move the tuning all over the band, and I do not hear a single sound. Nothing. If the tuner amplifier worked correctly, it should draw at least, I would say, 300 milliamps. Okay, and it's drawing barely a third of that. So what next? Well, let me set up the tuner in a bit a better position, so an easier to work on position, and then we'll have a closer look. Alright, a quick identification of all the parts of the tuner amplifier, the Braun Regie 450S. Alright, so here we go. So this is the main transformer. There's only one, and it only has one secondary output, and they are here. Right, then you have this board here. This is the end stage of the amplifier. Okay, and the end stage transistors are over there. They are originally TIP 3055 or TIP 5330 transistors. So NPN and respectively PNP. Then you have the IF board, which is this whole board here. And then you have the FM decoder board, which is this board here. It's actually, if I'm not mistaken, it's the decoder and mixer board. Then you have the preamp section of the radio, which is this board here, where all the potentiometers are located for setting the output tonality and volume. Right, then you have the radio reception area or filter area, if you wish, which is here. Okay, so this is mainly where the tuning happens, and the tuning cap is that big fat relay looking part down there. Okay, so that's the tuning capacitor. And then you have the sound source switch bank, which is this one here. So this board over here. You have the on-off switch right here, and then you have the speaker switches and the headphone input connectors right here. I know it's a bit dark, but this is where the headphone inputs are, which are DIN 5-pin connectors. Alright, so now that we identified all the parts, I can go on a little bit by saying that when I switch on the tuner amplifier, nothing happens. Not a sound, not a single sound. No matter which tuner band I try out, and the tuner bands are selected down there between that red and that yellow button. Okay, I think, wait, let me show you. So no matter which band I select, there is absolutely no sound, none whatsoever. I don't even hear a crackling, not even that. So what I think I will do first is try to find out whether the main board works or not. Yeah? Because if the main board, or I mean the main amplifier board doesn't work, then, well, I need to look for an error there first, and then we can move on to, let's say, the sound pre-amplification board, so this board. Right, I set my function generator to 420 Hertz, 400 millivolts output. Okay, and I'm going to inject the signal on the left and right channel of the amplifier section. Now, the left and right channel are conveniently accessible through these three pins you see over here. Okay, so the topmost one is ground. The left pin is obviously the left channel. The right pin is a right channel. And I connected up the output of the end stage to the two speakers you see up there. Alright? Now, for some specific reason I haven't found out yet, apparently I need to set the quadrophonics or the quadrophony switch to the on position. Don't ask me why, but it does seem that I need to do that. So now let me show you what happens when I inject a 420 Hertz signal into the end stage input. There you go. So let's try the left channel first. That seems to work. And that's the right channel. So at first glance I would say the end board or the amplification board works well or correctly as far as I can tell. So now we need to move on and see whether we can inject the signal into the sound selection board, which is this board right here, or the sound source selection board, which is this one here, and then see if there's an error here. And I also need to find out why I need to switch on the quadrophony switch. Yeah, I don't see any reason why I should have to, but apparently I have to. So yeah, let's check out those two things first, and if we still can't get no sound to come through to the end stage, then I need to find an error somewhere else. So the main power supply of the amplifier and the tuner is constructed on the main amplifier board inside the Braun. And you're looking at the schematic, and you can tell there are 3 fuses supposed to be there. So one here, one there, and one over there. Alright, now I did manage to locate those fuses. In fact, there's one fuse right here, and there are 2 more standing up right here. So these are soldered in fuses. Okay, now there is a very weird thing going on. There is, in fact, no power going from the main board, so in fact the board you're seeing right now, and let me take a pointer. So inside the board, right there where you see the laser, is a little breakout connector which takes either 25 volts or positive or 15 volts positive to the rest of the amplifier and tuner, and in fact it leads all the way up to that connector over there. Alright, there's a big black connector you see right there. Okay, now when I measure the outputs 4 and 5, which is this one, this is output 5, you can see the numbers down there. Okay. So when I measure on 5 or on 4, I measure no power whatsoever. So that might explain why the whole tuner and except for the amplifier itself, of course, is completely mute. No sound whatsoever from the tuner or any other part of the device. So what I need to do now is to find out why there is no power coming out of these 2 things here. So there could be a number of reasons, of course, either a fuse which has blown up, or possibly a capacitor shorting out, or maybe even a resistor, which is bad. So that's the next thing I'm going to try to figure out. Okay, so just to show you my point, I switch on the amplifier. Alright, now I'm going to measure the voltage at the connector, and let me put the voltmeter in a more accessible place. So if I measure pin 5, okay, so pin 5 is down here, and there you go, practically 0. Yeah, 100 millivolts, and it should be something closer to 25 volts. Okay, let me measure pin 4. Okay, something close to, well, 13 millivolts and rising, but I suspect that's because there is at that end there's somewhere a capacitor charging. But either way, it's a ridiculously low voltage, and in fact the voltage I measured here is not 100 millivolts, but is 100 of a millivolt. Yeah, so for all intents and purposes it's 0. So there is something seriously wrong here, or in the rest of the power supply. The plot thickens. So you see there the fuse of 150 milliamps, or 160 is kind of hard to read, which leads to that part of the amplifier board where there is a power transistor, and in fact I think this is a power regulation circuit. Yes, the circuit you see here is a power regulation circuit. Now, I did measure the voltage which comes out of the power transistor here, which is a BD377, and in fact you see it over there, right there. That's the BD377. And I measured at its emitter voltage, which should be 25 volts, and it gave out nothing. Now, when I went upstream, so via the collector and then down here, all the way up to here, I came out on the fuse, which is labeled as, if I'm not mistaken, is labeled like S801, this one here. And in fact, on the board, that fuse is located right there. Okay, that's the socket of the fuse, right there. I never understand why people seem to think that some analog meter, for example, tuning meter or any other kind of meter, when the needle doesn't seem to react to any kind of signal or something, people have the urge, I would say, to open up a gauge like this tuning gauge or meter, and try to mess around with the spool inside and the settings of the meter, in the hope that that would revive the meter. Now, in my experience, when a meter doesn't react or doesn't seem to react, most of the time the problem is actually not with the meter itself, but more with the circuitry that drives it. So yeah, all I can say is that I hope that I can convince people not to immediately think that it's the meter the problem, but rather the circuit behind it. So this is actually the second tuner in which I have had to replace a meter with a new one, or at least a mechanism of it, because somebody messed with it, and I really don't like it. But okay, I sort of managed to make a new meter, as you can tell, and the only thing I let's say reused from the old meter is actually the gauge panel, yeah, the readout, as it were, is the one thing I managed to salvage from the old meter. Well, and actually, and the cover. Okay, so this cover is actually, this translucent plastic cover is actually, let's say, part of the original cover, and then of course you have the gauge here, which is also a part of the old meter, which I actually ended up cutting off of the old meter because it was glued on so hard that I just couldn't release it from the old meter. So yeah, there you have it. This will be the new meter, and yeah, as you can tell, the mechanism is completely new. Yeah, and what I'm going to try next is fit the rebuilt meter inside the front panel, and in fact right here. Okay, and once that is done and the meter is attached to the front panel, then we can attach or reconnect the meter to the tuner and have a look whether it still functions normally once it's inside the tuner. So I replaced already quite a goodly number of capacitors, as you can tell. I didn't count them, but my guess would be I'm somewhere around 20, maybe a bit more. And yeah, I replaced them on the audio board over there. I replaced them on the stereo decoder board, which is there. And I already replaced quite a few on the amplifier board, except for the largest four, which I ordered and I still haven't received. And what I'm going to do next is replace the electrolytics on the couplets in the tuner. Now, let me see if I can give you a little close-up of one of those couplets. So you see three couplets right now in the image. Okay, so you see one here, there's another one here, and then there's one down there. Okay, and there are in fact four of these couplets inside the tuner, and as you can tell, there are quite a few electrolytics mounted on them. So to replace the electrolytics, I need to unsolder those couplets, and I'm going to start by the upper couplet, that one up there, and I need to do that. I need to unsolder these 5 pins here. At least I think they are 5. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. Yeah. So I need to unsolder these 5 pins here for the upper couplet and these 5 for the lower one. Okay, so I'm going to unsolder the top couplet, which is held in by these 5 pins here. So here we go. Hang on. I'm going to reposition. Can you see this, guys? Yeah, I think you can. Okay, so here we go. Okay, I think the couplet is loose, so let's see whether it is. Oh yeah, I think you can see the pins move. Okay, so now let me pull it out gently. Hang on. Let me put away my heat gun. So, where is it? There it is. this. Okay, so here we go. Okay, it's loose, I think. I'm hampered by a few wires, I think. Come on. Hang on. Give me a minute. Yeah. There, I think I got it. Yeah. Here it is. Okay. Couplet number 1 removed. I recapped and cleaned the little couplet boards, which are on the main tuner board. That one right here. Okay. And yeah, so I've replaced all the capacitors, and while doing that I actually noticed that the boards are identical in component value and in layout of the PCB. And it's the same thing for the larger couplet boards. You know, yeah, they are actually almost identical. Well, in fact, they are identical, except for the positioning maybe of some of the capacitors and resistors. Some of them are in fact reversed, but you know as well as I do that in the case of resistors, that has no influence at all in the working of the boards, and well, the positioning of the capacitors might have a slight influence, but not to such a degree that it would be annoying or bad in any sense. So, and anyway, those boards must have worked correctly in the past. So yeah, there you go. They are identical in couples. So these two are identical, those two are identical. The engineers at Braun did a marvelous job designing this tuner amplifier, but nevertheless they made a few things that, well, could be qualified as details, but which still annoy me a little bit. I mean, compared to what they built and designed, there are a few sloppy details, and one of those sloppy details is the way they mounted those capacitors on the tuner preset memory board. You see them there. Yeah, it's something like 6 1 microfarad electrolytic capacitors. I don't like the way that looks, and since I have to replace them anyhow, I thought I could come up with something a little bit better, and that's why I built this. So I mounted 6 1 microfarad capacitors on a nice little board, a nice little perf board, and I also built a holder, which you see at the end there, and that will be mounted upside down, of course, over there. So there's one screw there, so like this, and there you have it, completely mounted and finished. Alright, so like I said, the engineers at the Braun factory did a rather nice job, except for a few annoying details. And one of the details are these little wheels, you know, and as you can tell, they are quite loose. Okay, so, and the tuner is apparently full of those. Well, when I say full, at least 4 of them, like this little one here. Okay. So, yeah, I don't think it would be a good idea to keep them the way they are. So, I will in fact need to find a solution to remedy this, because in the long run this will not work properly. So the little wheel, I took it off the front of the radio. I took off one, in fact, and it was positioned right here, where you see this hole punched in the, or through the chassis. Okay, now in that little hole sat this little plastic thingy, and you can kind of see the shape it has, corresponding to the shape of the hole punched in the chassis. Now, as you can tell, or probably you can tell, a little part of it broke off. You can see it over there. So a little tab broke off its side. In fact, you could say it hung on by a thread. You know, so barely. It was barely hanging on. So what I need to do, in fact, is to find a way to make this work a little bit better. And it's all laid out here, except for the pulley wheel, of course. So in between these little white tabs will be the pulley, and behind those little white tabs, so behind the back one, will go this nylon washer. Then the whole thing will go through the chassis. Then I'll put on a copper washer and then a nut. And I'll lock the whole thing with some Loctite, like this. Okay. And the result is actually what you see down there. Okay. So you see there, that's the nut holding down the copper washer. I'm trying to give you some light so you can see what I mean. Okay, so down there you see the nut and the copper washer resting against the hole in the chassis. And then on this side, I'm trying to see if you can, yeah, you can just about see it. You see the nylon washer and those two little washers surrounding the pulley wheel. Okay, so, and I tried out several combinations, and I found out that this combination, in fact, seems to work best. So the least possible friction on the pulley and the strongest attachment to the chassis itself. So, and I think you can see that if I try to rock the whole thing. See, there's absolutely no movement in it. Alright, so all the pulleys have been fitted with those little white bushings, and then the washers, the nylon and copper washers, and they're all attached. There are 4 of them, and I secured the nuts with some Loctite. So now that we fixed that, I think since I'm still waiting for the large capacitors of the amplifier, now has come perhaps the ideal moment to do some cleaning. And that's exactly what I'll do. I'll pull off all the knobs and clean them in my ultrasonic washer, and I'll probably give the front bezel a cleaning as well. So yeah, I'm just going to mount back the tuner knobs or the tuner knob assembly, and then I'm going to pull off all the knobs. Now, one tip to pull them off, you see the knobs have a slit on top, okay? So what you do is you fit a small flat screwdriver in the slit, and you slightly push both halves of the shaft of the knob open while you pull the knob towards you, okay? But don't force it, okay? So only use the necessary force until you feel the knob beginning to slide, and that's the moment you should back off. Alright, so we're going to give all the plastic wear of the Braun, so the knobs and the dial pointer and a few other odds and ends, a little washing in my ultrasonic cleaner. I'm going to dump all the parts in the little basket. There you go, including some little parts that broke off of some knobs, specifically the Braun knob. Apparently the previous owner had sort of cracked the knob and had not told me about it, and of course when I tried to remove it now, the parts, the leftover part, here's one, so like this little part here, yeah, the parts, oh, and there's the other one, yeah, okay, so the parts just broke off and I was left with them in my hand. So in we dump the parts into the board. Oh yeah, and by the way, the dial cord in the end did break, and I didn't want to tear it loose from the tuner capacitor wheel, because I'm afraid the previous owner glued it to the wheel, which is a real pain. But in any case, I'll leave the broken wire on the wheel and give the whole thing a little dunking, as you see. And let's see how long we'll program it. It's 540 seconds, 720 seconds, 900 seconds. That would be how many minutes divided by 60? That would be 15 minutes. Okay. 15 minutes is not long enough. 21, 24, 27, 30 minutes. Okay. Well, here we go. Okay, so the parts are in the cleaner and we'll leave them there for about 30 minutes. Alright, so one of the next things I'm going to have to take a look at is some change the previous owner, or maybe the owner before him, although I tend to think it's probably the previous owner, I mean before me, who did this, but built in some Christmas lights as a repair to the original lights that were probably installed in the tuner. And why am I saying Christmas lights? Because it's almost 100% sure that's what these were originally. And they were spliced in by the previous owner. And how can I tell? Well, by this kind of handiwork. Okay. So, granted, he used a little bit of solder and a little bit of shrink tubing to keep it quote-unquote safe. But then he did that, but then he did this. Yeah? He soldered a resistor into the power line of the lights. Okay, I don't know if you can see this, but come on. Yeah, there you go. So he soldered in a little resistor into the power line to drop the voltage a little bit, but then left the terminals open to the air, right? So yeah, great job, man. So yes, I don't trust his handiwork at all. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to cut loose these Christmas lights and see if I can make something a little bit better than what he did. Also, now I'm working on the tuner capacitor tuning wheel. And the original cord, and I think you can see part of it, is that white and green striped cord you see there. And for some reason he glued it to the tuning wheel. Well done job, man. Really great. Yeah. So anyway, the cord he had placed, or maybe somebody before him, was this cord here. This yellowish white cord. And of course it broke. So what I need to do is now repair the tuning cord mechanism. I hate that, and I'm sure quite a few amongst you will say, oh, we hate it too. Yeah, because it's really a pain to get it right. But I think I can do it. So yeah, I've got my job cut out for me. So first order of business is to clean up the tuning pulley wheel, which is mounted on this axle here, and then of course repair the whole tuning mechanism, and then find out what's the deal with these Christmas lights. Alright, so down there you see the inside of the tuning capacitor. And the only thing I needed to do to get a view of it inside is lift this little plastic cover here. Okay, and in fact I did that by simply lifting it with these little plastic tabs here over like that. and then pushing it to the side, and there you have it, the inside of the tuning capacitor. Now, the reason why I did that is because the tuning capacitor was incredibly stiff to turn. Okay, so turning it took really a very large amount of force to get it to even turn a little bit. So what I actually did was spray some very, very fine oil into the gears you see, or the ball bearings you see down there. And I did the same thing on the other side, where you see those gears right here, okay, and the ball bearings behind them. So I sprayed a little bit of very fine oil, and I used silicone oil like this. Okay, some universal silicone oil, which you use for typewriters and stuff like that, or little mechanical clocks and stuff like that. So now the tuning capacitor turns a lot easier, way much easier. So yeah, I think I fixed this now. So this should do. Now it's ready to get rewired. That little connector right here, where I'm shining my laser pointer at, and specifically that red and black wire, is where the voltage goes through to that string of lights you see over there. Now, I went through the schematic, of course, and basically what the schematic says is, let me show you. So these are the three lights, the Christmas lights I showed you, and there's a small resistor in between. Yeah. Now these light bulbs were the original ones, and if I'm not mistaken, they are 12 volts, 30 milliamp light bulbs. I mean, like filament light bulbs. And there used to be a 68 ohm resistor up in the chain of light bulbs, and the reason for that is because you can tell right here from the schematic that the voltage coming from the transformer is somewhere between 39 and 42 volts AC, goes all the way up to the bridge rectifier, okay, to one of the pins of the bridge rectifier, and in fact the bridge rectifier is that red block here, you see here, okay, and the other end of the light string goes to, in fact, the other pin of the bridge rectifier, okay. So, what's all this about? Well, the thing is, apparently the light bulbs here were fed with an AC voltage, and something which is weird to me, at least, is that the wiring for the AC voltage, which is this black and red wire here, yeah, has been fed through a cable loom carrying high frequency and low frequency signals. Yeah, so from, for example, the IF board to the tuner board, etc. And I can't imagine an engineer designing AC from running parallel with all sorts of other signaling wires. I mean, I have a real hard time to believe this, because um, this is really calling for trouble. Okay, if you're going to run wires carrying AC voltage at 50 Hertz, along with all sorts of other cables running like sound level signals or even high frequency signals, you are going to induce all sorts of noise. Alright, so yeah, the dial mechanism is repaired. So I ran a cord all along the mechanism and all the way back, put back the needle and temporarily the tuning knob to try it out, and it works. You know, so but I swear this is a pain to do. Okay, repairing a dial mechanism, I mean restringing it. Restringing a dial mechanism is a real pain, and until now I haven't ever met any electronics hobbyist or professional who really enjoys it, because restringing a dialing mechanism is a real pain. It took me about the better part of an hour to repair it, and it was really not a nice job. But there you go. The mechanism is repaired, and I also cleaned the backlight screen, let's say, through which the light is shown onto the tuning dial. So that's clean as well. So the only two things for now, at least, that I need to do is fix the backlight, so probably with LEDs, and replace the large capacitors in the amplification stage. And when that is done, I do believe we could go and try to fire up the tuner and see whether it works or not. It could be that there is still a problem that we need to fix. But let's cross fingers and hope that once the capacitors are replaced, everything will work as it should. Alright. Okay, so the tuner is done. I mean, in electronically speaking, everything that needed to be done in the tuner is done. All the contacts are cleaned, all the electrolytics were replaced. I also checked all the resistors on each PCB, just to make sure that there are none bad or burned. And in fact, while doing so, I did discover one resistor that was actually bad, and you can see it down there. You see the little blue resistor in the center of the image. So that's a metal film resistor, okay. And the original one, which was a reddish one like this one here, was supposed to be a 1 kilo ohm resistor, but measured low. I don't remember how much exactly, but somewhere around 900 ohms. And it also looked burnt. I mean, literally burnt. So my guess is the capacitor to which it is coupled, so this one right here, which is labeled as C704, must have shorted out, or nearly so, and must have caused the resistor to overheat. So yeah, I replaced that resistor as well. I also mounted a tiny variable power supply, and it's a regulated one, to feed all the LEDs that will light the display of the tuner. And you can tell I built my own little light reflectors. And the idea is, of course, that the LEDs which have direct beam light, so not diffuse, is to diffuse the light is to such an extent that the whole display is actually lit from one end to the other. Okay. So, and it also feeds the LED that lights up the signal strength meter. I'll put somewhere near the end of the video, I'll put up the schematic of that little variable power supply. Actually, the input voltage is around 44 volts AC. Its output, on the other hand, is set to, if I'm not mistaken, 3.8 volts, which is ample enough to drive blue LEDs, in fact the ones you see down there. The little potentiometer on the power supply allows you to set the brightness of the LEDs. Now, all the modifications I made in this radio, and when I say all, I mean the new signal strength meter, well, no, not that one, but the memory capacitor bank for the analog station memories, yeah, FM station memories, and that little power supply for the blue LEDs of the display. Well, those changes are reversible. So if someone in the future were to own this radio and they are purists, they can easily disconnect that little power supply and disconnect the little capacitor bank I made here and bring back the radio to its original state. Well, at least in the sense, of course, that the electrolytics are not original anymore, but my guess is in 50 years or so, these electrolytics you see right now won't be good any longer and will have to be replaced by new electrolytics or any sort of component that would replace an electrolytic. So yeah, by and large, the whole tuner is, I would say, 95 to 97% original. Yeah? So except for a brand new field strength meter or gauge, a display illumination power supply, and a memory capacitor bank, the tuner is completely original. I also cleaned all the switches with some contact cleaner. I cleaned off all the dust and grime inside the radio, and yeah, I think this tuner amplifier can be declared as good again. There you go. It's really, really loud. I pushed the amp to about halfway, and the speakers almost exploded when I tried to go beyond, let's say, halfway. So yeah, the output power of the amplifier is terrific. Now, if only I could hook up um, some truly good and awesome speakers, that would be nice. But who knows? Maybe this year I will hit the 1,000 subscribers in 2020 or so, and maybe my channel will generate a little bit of income that I might be able to use to buy myself a pair of awesome speakers instead of these rather cute but completely used up speakers, vintage ones. Loewe. Not a bad brand, as it were, but the speakers are definitely underpowered. If you hook them up to an impressive amplifier like this, that can pump out at least 35 watts through each channel. Yeah. So yes, I'm pretty happy with it as it is. The only thing I need to do now is replace the buttons you see here, but in the right order. I need to have a look at the pictures I took to tell in which order I need to place the colored buttons back. I did find in the end a little light bulb for the stereo indicator, and that turned out to be a tiny little 12-volt dashboard light you can find in many cars all around the world. So yeah, if you can buy a little dashboard light, and I mean a dashboard light bulb with an actual filament, then you can use that as a replacement for the stereo indicator, which is great. Okay, so there you go. A last look on the front of the tuner. So the next two step I need to take is to replace the cabinet on the tuner's chassis, and then we're done with this project. And the serial number of the Braun is 12425. Okay, so yeah, there you go.
Thanks a lot, Technomora, for this new episode. We hope that you, our viewers, will be back soon for another interesting and entertaining video. But for now, goodbye from me, Julie, and Technomora. Bye!